Because we've got an external person that's going to answer questions, I'm just going to pop to another item so we can get that done now, which is number 9, the Armagh Street, Colombo Street Convention Centre parking management.
Mr. Chair, I'd appreciate if I could bring up, I'll certainly present the report, but I have two Takaro staff, project managers.
Yeah, that'd be great if they can come up to the table too.
Join the table.
Yes, thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, this report is about two frontages to Te Pai, the convention centre. It's mainly relating to the Armagh Street frontage and the Colombo Street frontage. In addition to that is just a small change proposed on which has been requested on the northern side of Armagh Street, and I understand that the Mayor was involved with the opening of a refurbished Ice Cream cart on the weekend. Perhaps if I could just quickly talk about that for a start. The current situation is that the park is reserved for the ice cream van during the day, essentially, but overnight it's supposed to be a short-term park. The issue that the new owner has, who's invested quite a bit, I understand, in a complete new ice cream van, is that he needs to bring ice cream to the site very early in the morning, and he needs to have the refrigeration operating so he can do that. And talking to Takaro staff as well, we don't see any problem with that, his site being a 24/7 for the Heritage ice cream van. It has the side benefits of not having to try and manoeuvre the van in and out of the park each day, which would be quite problematic. So that's one part of the officer recommendation to you. Now, the main part is the two frontages to Te Pai, being Armagh and Colombo. The purpose of this, and I certainly acknowledge the conversation on the parking policy and comments made. As you know, we can't provide on-street parking for all customers of the future Te Pai events. What the proposal is essentially is to provide short-term and servicing requirements, particularly for tour coaches, short-term drop-off pickup, an accessibility park, or mobility park with accessibility, which is two distinct issues, as well as a loading zone. We are providing 5 standard P60 metered parks as well. So happy to take any questions on this.
Thank you, Aaron.
Yes, I got a couple. First one is on the mobility car park on Colombo Street. I see there's a gap behind it. Is that where there's a cut down in the gutter?
Yes, I believe so. That's, as I mentioned, we have mobility parks and then we also have accessible parks. And our current standard is now that we attempt to put, wherever possible, the cut down at the back of the park. The reason for that is traditionally people who could drive a car but were perhaps wheelchair bound would always be alighting from their vehicle, obviously from the driver's door, but we do have a number of people who can drive, and they're driving vans now and finding it easier to actually get out of the vehicle at the back of the van with perhaps a hoist, mechanical hoist. And so therefore having the cut down at the back is seen to be best practice.
So, but there is a cut down there because we've put them in elsewhere around the city without cut downs. Correct. So you have to go to the next corner.
100% there's a cut down.
So then my next question on disability mobility car parks is last time we signed off a street plan on Armagh Street there was one on that side of the convention centre. It was more in relation to the town hall at the time. So you've got a convention centre that on this map has one disability car park or mobility car park. Why is our target so low?
Well, the intention certainly is to look at, you'll be aware that at the Performing Arts Precinct, just immediately to the east of the Tapai, we have the new Court Theatre going in and a new car parking building. Now, I've been advised that the projected numbers of car parks there are between 320 to 400 car parks. And I've also been advised that while we obviously provide a proportion of those as accessible parks, for the Performing Arts Precinct building, that we are going to provide a higher proportion of accessible parks for people with mobility issues. I'm fully conscious of your comments earlier that there are some people who still do not like parking in car parking buildings. That doesn't apply just to people in mobility situations, it's a lot of people. We just simply don't have the curbside space to provide. And
Okay, so
we went through that whole discussion just in the previous.
Yeah, and the concept of having the one, is there mobility car park somewhere else on the site for Tapai?
We're putting on the vacant land that you can see just on the corner of Cathedral Square.
Yep.
There will be some temporary mobility parks there until that site's developed.
So they're temporary, so then after that, disabled people don't come to Tapai? Is that the plan?
Well, no, so after that, there's the space on Colombo Street. There was originally, like you mentioned earlier, Armagh Street, that was actually built as a accessible car park there, but that's a decision that council's made to change that.
Not this council, that I'm aware of.
I can expand on that. In the former elected term, we had what was called the Parking Restrictions Subcommittee. The decision was made at that committee to remove the car park, the mobility park adjacent to the Ice Cream Charlie ice cream van side. Okay. So,
right.
And that was due to extremely low use of that park.
Right. So the people that were the mobility people weren't coming to town to look at building sites. I'm picking.
Possibly that was the case.
And gravel and stuff.
As I say, as we develop, we'll have the temporary parking, as Lizzie has mentioned, but also then we'll have the permanent parking coming online within, we hope, 18 months within the new Performing Arts Precinct building. Okay,
so, and excuse my frustration, so where the parking building's going to go along next to the Theatre Royal, do we know if there's soffites all the way along there? So when you get out of your, because when you add 80 or 100 metres, sitting in a chair in the rain, not the most fun. I encourage everyone to try it at least once. So when we make these decisions, you know what we are deciding on.
Look, the thing at this stage, I would say probably no, because at this stage, but it's not set in concrete, is that the proposal is for the Performing Arts Precinct car parking building to have access via Gloucester Street.
Right.
I suppose it is possible to put a canopy over a vehicle entrance, but it's not usual.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, and then finally, sorry Mike, there's just a number here. We're taking out a lot of car parks. So Colombo Street up until now had parking right up to the Gloucester Street corner. So there's a loss of at least 4 running south of our decision paper here. And then at the north end, there's room for at least 1 more. And then when you go around the corner, there's at least 5 out in front of the old ANZ building. So why are we taking all these out? It's just all yellow lines. It just seems like a waste of potential available space and revenue, which isn't in our report, is the loss of revenue that we would get from those sites as well.
Perhaps my Takaro colleagues can describe
here
better.
as
But
well.
we certainly, through to Pi, there is there's vehicle entrances off Colombo Street and back out onto Colombo. So there's a
Right.
circulating laneway, service lane for large vehicles. In fact,
Yeah,
Good.
so, so going from moving west to east along Armagh Street, so there's the crossing, start from Oxford Terrace, there's the crossing over to what was the old accessible car park, now Ice Cream Charlie. Then there's the bus, essentially bus drop-off and loading, and 2 P5s. That next bit where the dotted yellow line is, that's as Mike says, that's a entry and exit into to Pi itself for loading, and then it comes round and into the intersection itself. And then
So
coming,
that's a loading zone there, or just because the
it's an
entrance way.
entry and
'cause you
exit.
can't-
It's
you
for loading.
Right.
The vehicles loading for the to Pi itself.
Right, but they're not
Um,
driving through the old ANZ building. That would, the historic people would have kittens.
There's a driveway.
Next
The
door.
ANZ building is
That's the corner.
the
Lady
Lady
Diana
Isaac
Isaac
House.
building. Yeah.
Yeah, so right next to it, that's the entry into to Pi for loading. Yeah. And obviously these are big trucks, so there's a sweep that they need to get in and out.
Okay, and all the ones on Colombo Street?
So going down, so you've got the 2 P60s. These are just what we think we've suggested, and then the accessible car park with the cut down, and then the P10 space for 2 smaller
Goods
loading
vehicles,
areas. Yeah. Another 2 P60s, and then there's the exit from the convention centre for loading and unloading. So there's a one-way through the convention centre internally. There's one way through for the trucks.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So unfortunately, that does take a space out from. Yeah.
And if I could just add to that too, whilst it's still not set in concrete, there is a proposal potentially for a hotel on the corner of
Yes.
Colombo and Cathedral Square. Once again, it's not set in concrete, but I have seen plans. What's the terminology? Port cachere or something. You know, we have a drive-in, drive-out entrance. So for tour coaches to come in and out there, as well as coming out of Te Pai itself. So it doesn't actually lend itself well for additional car parking in that area.
Right, well, yep.
Mel. Oh,
With the those P60 parks, so who is envisaged will park there? Because it wouldn't be someone going to a conference all day. So what's sort of the intention?
I mean,
And I'm not meaning to say I want them permanent. I'm just asking. Who
yeah, so I mean, any member of the public in general coming to the Performing Arts Precinct or this area, but conceivably along here. So this is the admin building of the convention centre on this side. So there might be conference organisers coming into the admin building, doing their bookings, things like that. And there's also a couple of retail units on the ground floor of that building.
Mm-hmm.
And so there would be retail customers as well might use them.
Okay. So for the mobility park, though,
Yeah.
if that was for, I mean, I would envisage that would be for someone who was going to a conference there, and they would probably want to pay parking for longer than 60 minutes. So is there any ability to lengthen the time for the mobility park?
Absolutely. The practice at the moment by our parking compliance is that they give double the time, up to 2 hours. You know, if it's a P120, they give that P120 as the time that they can park. If it's a P60 mobility park, they're given double the time. And generally, people with a mobility permit know of this.
No, my understanding that's not quite correct. My understanding is actually if it's a standard car park, they get it doubled, But if it's a mobility car park, it's actual time on the mobility car park. That's why most of them around the town are double the actual standard car park that's beside it. So Mel's right, like when you look at that one, it should be a 120 because the standard car parks are 60s.
Well, my apologies for that. That was my
That's just my
understanding.
understanding.
I will certainly double check that.
Yeah.
But we certainly, it could be very easily changed in the recommendation to say rather than 60 minutes to make that.
Yeah, I think it should be 120.
In a further question, because of the fact that other, there's not much parking for mobility, I actually think there should be, I would prefer there were two. Would there be, those parks are longer than a normal park, so is there room to have two of them there rather than like get rid of one of the other P60s for ordinary parking?
Yeah, well, anything's possible. It was just that, as Lizzie said, the idea of the P60s was for other persons like visiting retail or coming in from the administrative side of Te Pai to provide a balance of parking. We would just suggest that to provide mobility parking just simply to provide it rather than based on need is not usually good. What we could do is come back to you if we had a demonstrated need that there was a significant demand there. That would be a very easy process to have approval through this committee to change those parks.
So how would the need be demonstrated? Because I would have thought it would be easier to do it the other way, where you had two parks there and one's empty all the time. Whereas if one's always full, people are going to be going somewhere else.
I think, Mel, though, you've got to look a little bit further than just those two streets. So if you look at Gloucester, Colombo, outside the Tauranga, there's 4 disability car parks there as well. So sort of looking at what's happening on the other side of Colombo Street too. And so it's trying to get an area slightly bigger than just that one street.
Staff do take a holistic view,
Yeah.
so they pretty well know how many.
I'm just questioning.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and to the committee, if I can just say too, because one question was asked in this previous item about the technical design of these, and it gets difficult for us to design the full perfect mobility park in where we've got a standard width footpath. For example, to have the cut down with the appropriate gradient for a wheelchair to get back onto the footpath can be quite problematic if we're making a further wide indent into the footpath, then have to gradient. There can be difficulties with that. So yeah, we prefer to provide on demand where we can, and we certainly are. Councillor Kewen will recall with the town hall, and you mentioned that we're just about to implement finally with getting roadworks completed on Colombo Street round the Kilmore Street. We'll be putting in mobility parks there as well, and they will be wider and longer and have the accessibility.
Leanne?
I guess this highlights one of the issues around engagement over the design features. Because it's a convention centre, we certainly did feedback very early on in the design process that there needed to be on-site parking for people with disabilities. Because it's not just people in wheelchairs, it's people who have, challenges, walking long distances, and actually the car park building will be a long distance for some. So, and if you have conferences, then it's really important to cater for people who will find it challenging to get on site. But leaving that aside, let me focus on the buses and the shuttles that you've got there highlighted for P30 and the loading zones, which are loading zones 24/7, even though the demand is never going to be 24/7. So it's going to be focused on particular times of the day and particular days of the week more than others, And I know that where we've got taxi zones in town that are available for parking during the day but available for taxis during the night, it's a really good use of the space, if we think of spaces. And I would hate to see people not going to Ice Cream Charlie, if we're very supportive of the proposal there, if the four car parks, or actually potentially the 6 car park or 7 car parks that sit there, 2, 4, 6 car parks that sit there, assuming that the one bus is the equivalent of 2 car parks, then it's such a shame that they can't stop off and buy an ice cream and consume that, and then move on if they're travelling into town by car. We were told at the time that the convention centre was being designed that people would be dropped off in buses at the front door, and that the flow would be across that shared pathway, which is why we spent considerable sums, I think the government did, in terms of the strengthening of the Gloucester Street Bridge. So, and the Gloucester Street Bridge would not have needed to be strengthened to that standard if it weren't for the buses. So I cannot understand why you want to claim P30 for 2 bus stops that can't be used any other time by anyone else, and 2 loading zones that can only be used for service vehicles on Armagh Street, and then the P10s, the 2 P10s on the other side, only available for that short term, but only for particular types of vehicles. Even if it was a P10 for the ability to go across to the Court Theatre and buy some tickets or whatever different.
I think, yeah, I mean, it is all trade-offs with the P2 coach stops on Armagh Street. The operation of the convention centre itself will not be just 9 to 5. It will be a much more of a day-night kind of event centre. There'll be evening events held here. There'll also be, in terms of loading and unloading, there'll be work going throughout the night in terms of setup for large events and conferences. So the need for the 2 coach stops was to enable events to have the certainty that they had coach stops available for their events. Yeah. So this is as a shared zone. The coaches could only do up to a 5-minute drop-off pickup, so they wouldn't be able to wait for the people to get on.
Why not?
So a shared zone doesn't. The rules, I might be using the wrong term, Mike, sorry. You're looking very nervous. The rules of a shared zone only enable up to 5 minutes of stopping.
What if those rules were able to be addressed? You know, it does seem to me that, I mean, this is a significant imposition I mean, this paper deals with 2 things. Ice Cream Charlie on one side of the road and the inability to use any parking space on Armagh Street to support that business.
Oh, it does.
All I can say is that actually this was considered by the Parking Restrictions Subcommittee chaired by Councillor Cotter at the time, and we found that the outcome of that was to create short-term parking right beside the Ice Cream Charlie. You know, there's 2 car parks simply there, 5-minute parks for people wishing to pull up and drive in, purchase an ice cream.
I don't recall dealing with the coaches on this side though.
No, we
You
didn't
were
actually.
talking about the other side.
Yeah, at the time.
But what we're saying here, Michael, is that this suggestion leaves the south side of Armagh Street vacant most of the time and no one able to park there.
Well, Yeah, as Lizzie just said, the idea of the coach stops is that there will be coaches coming and going day and night.
But why can't they come over the Armagh, the Gloucester Street Bridge? I keep calling it the Armagh, the Gloucester Street Bridge, and wait up there if they need to be filling up at night. I mean, if it's a nighttime function, it'll be 10 o'clock and then 11 o'clock and then midnight. You know, like it's not going to be a major disruption to have them just sitting there. But you're going to take these car parks for the whole of the time. I mean, I'm just, it is an issue that I feel has not been thought through.
Maybe just the technical detail of it is we all know that the Open River Promenade goes from north to south. So when you talk about Gloucester, coaches cannot do a left-hand, it's a no left-hand turn there, but coaches will be when the Ridges Hotel site. In that design, there are 2 coach stops in front of that in that design. So coaches could come across, this is for servicing hotels and alike, and do a right hand off Gloucester and start going down Oxford Terrace in terms of, and they, so you were mentioning before coaches coming in off Gloucester, so you cannot do a left hand turn and go up Oxford Terrace when you come across Gloucester. So, but you can come.
Sorry, I'm going to stop this because this is just turning into a workshop in this meeting, and the time frame actually around getting these approved can't be that urgent considering the time frame around the convention centre opening.
In terms of the curb alignment, it is. We are, in terms of actually putting the curb in, that's part of the works that are actually underway at the moment. But in terms of lines on the road, you're right, that's you want those in place for the opening, which is mid next year. I think just for Oxford Terrace, sorry, I'm not very good at being clear, sorry, but on Oxford Terrace, as you drive up, drive down, sorry, Pete. As you drive down, so any coaches stopping and waiting would be stopping in the carriageway, so they actually can't stop in the wait in the carriageway.
I'm just trying to get to a resolution today because I think the major concern is at the moment is more around this coach stop. The Ice Cream Charlie I think's fine in terms of the decision we're making today, and we also, if we increase the disability car park to 120, the other side should be fine. If we approve all those and actually then have another discussion at a later point, is there any curb alterations that would have to be done in terms of the coach stop being coach stop or car parks that would be impacted by not doing that decision today?
There's no, that's purely line marking.
Okay, so there's no drop downs down there?
No. Correct.
Okay, so what I'd want to do is I just want to go through and make decisions on Colombo Street and the Ice Cream Charlie one, and then we'll just park the other one, yes, on Armagh Street south side, and we'll have a proper workshop to try and actually get a resolution around that's actually acceptable to council. Does that work for your timeframes in terms of doing construction on the?
Yeah. So as long as the curb doesn't change,
okay,
that's fine. I'll just. But in terms of the whether this is a coach stop or not. So to get to this position, we had consulted with ASM, the operator. So if that was not, if council didn't want coaches to be able to stop there, we would have to go back to
that's
ASM.
why I want to take it offline instead of doing it here. I can see your hands. So I want to move forward with this. So I want the questions actually to realise what we're going to do in terms of not making the decision today on Armagh Street, south side of Armagh Street, okay? So I don't want any questions on that, please. I just want to... Yeah. Mel.
this is a question on Armagh Street, but I think it could be a solution, but that's why that could be done. My question is, for the P5 loading, well, it's a loading zone, is there any reason why it just can't be a P5 park, or the two parks, and then it can be a loading zone or a P5 park for anyone? You know, because what difference does it make?
Yeah, the P5s are just drop-offs for anybody.
But I thought it was a loading zone in the number 8 resolution.
But not
Because it
goods only.
says P5 and then it says loading zone.
But it doesn't say good vehicles only.
So it's just a P5 for anyone.
Yeah.
So what's the problem
The-
with it?
The idea of a P5 loading zone is just that it's really for the purposes of dropping off goods or people within a 5-minute period. So it's in effect just a 5-minute park, but you've got to be physically loading or unloading, dropping off, picking up.
No,
No, it
they
doesn't
said
have
it's
to be.
not.
No, not there, because it doesn't say good vehicles only.
So why not just say P5 and then we're all happy?
Well, it doesn't really matter. I suppose it would be if somebody came along there and decided to park for 5 minutes to look at the view and then drive off. That's self-defeating. But
Yeah. No, he says you can.
Mike, how do we move forward with what you'd
Just do P5, it's done.
I haven't even asked a question.
Oh, okay, so, Yanni, what's your question on quickly?
Okay, so
Sorry, so I think you could, in terms of the issue that you're identified, in terms of being able to park up and get an ice cream from Ice Cream Charlie or not, you could do that from the P5s.
Yeah, look, I think the only concern's around the coach, so we can do everything else apart from the coach parking at the moment. Yanni, what's your question?
yeah, so I just wanted to know, was there a traffic assessment done as part of the convention centre location and design? And if so, can we actually see what the traffic planning was? Because what's clear from this, which seems to be clear, is that it doesn't seem very joint up. And my concern is, having attended an event in Victoria Square on the weekend, there's almost no loading space for people that are having events in Victoria Square now. So we actually do need loading
Yeah.
space, not just for the convention centre, but for
But
all the
for-
other things
Yeah.
that are happening.
Sorry, yes, and those P30s are not the exclusive use of ASM. They are
Where are the P30s?
the operator. The P30 coach stops.
But like the scale of the nature of events that are going to be happening, I presume you'd need a lot more space than what's being proposed. And the other question is, I have around the convention centre, is surely as part of the design, there was incorporation of service lanes and loading zones?
yes,
Like, and so is there anything built in to the actual building where like people can service the facilities?
this is yes, yeah. So in terms of servicing to Pi, there's an internal access through the building and out for loading and unloading of service stuff. What you see here is the outcome of the traffic assessment that was done for Tapai.
Right,
So can we get that circulated?
I'm going to
Just
adjourn
the
this. I'm
other-
going to adjourn this meeting now for 5 minutes while we work through some resolutions that'll actually make us do what I've suggested. So we'll come back at 11:10.
that was it, Mr Chair. Number 13 is the one to not approve.
So I'm happy. So the other thing is I'd like to, actually I'll do another time. I can't have you move it. No, 13's gone, so it becomes a line. So the original clause in there to have, it's gone. We're not doing the coach parking, everything else is, so I'm happy to move it over, second it.
Sorry to interrupt, Mr Chair, but would you be able to turn your mic on?
Thanks, Jamie. We're just trying to get through this very quickly. So, do you want me to go over it again, Jamie? Could you turn your mic on?
Sorry, I could just hear you through some other people's microphones. Just.
Thank you.
I know what you're trying to support of, so I won't hold it up. Go.
Tim?
Thank you. Just as a clarification, just beside Ice Cream Charlie, not shown on this site plan, are two P5, so you can swing in. So that, yeah, so just to relieve anyone's concerns about Ice Cream Charlie, I won't be supporting this today simply because I want to get a better understanding of what the vision is now for the loading and unloading 2T Pi. Originally, my understanding was the buses would enter from Armagh Street, disembark and load from in front of the venue and then go out via the Gloucester Street Bridge to Durham Street. That was my original understanding. Somewhere along the line there's been a change, and so I would like a better understanding and a workshop on that, because I think it's a bigger issue with regards to Christchurch centric rather than one little thing about whether it's Ice Cream Charlie or disabled parking or just immediate parking in the area.
Yeah, couple of things. So I don't disagree with Tim there around the access to and from Te Pai for the visiting guests, and hopefully it is a very successful site, and in which case access becomes a really big issue. And then of course there's the hotel site, which hopefully goes ahead as a hotel, where the temporary disability car parks are going. But my biggest concern, and especially with the modern building designs in Christchurch with the lack of soffites over the footpaths, is the placement of disability car parking and the lack of, so A, the placement of, and B, the lack of. This is a clear example of built prejudice, where we're rebuilding a city which has clear prejudice against particular people in our society. If you were to say, only men or only a particular ethnic group will park around there and then come in the building the back way, you would be slammed. But it seems okay to do it for the disability sector, and I think that's unacceptable. It's bad enough that Te Pai didn't want to have a changing spaces in their facility. Hopefully their disability toilets are up to scratch, so on and so forth. But we have a real opportunity as a city, as we're rebuilding, given that we're flat with a mild climate, to be the #1 location in the world for the disability sector. It's called the Access Dollar, and it's worth money, and it should be worth good money to our city. And this is a facility, when you have one disabled person going to an event, just not good enough. Yes, there are car parks further up the road, but once again, they're not covered by soffites, and I encourage everyone. In fact, I'm going to buy a wheelchair myself, and I'm going to share it with everyone here next time it rains. We can all go do a lap around the block. I want to see who comes back the driest. I'm going to put my money on Mike, because he's probably the fittest here, but everyone will count backwards from there to see who gets the wettest, because I don't think you're going to enjoy it, and yet you're willing to do it to other people.
Yanni?
Yeah, I certainly won't be supporting this today. I mean, this just shows you the whole issue of just planning individual projects without looking at the bigger context. The reality is that there's been a huge number of projects going in, and we don't seem to have any coherent traffic or transport planning for this part of the city. It is really concerning, I think, to have such a major facility being put in this site without any responsibility on that design to incorporate the parking requirements and the loading requirements. I think the point that Councillor Kewen makes, I strongly agree with. If this was a place in the suburbs that was building, they would have a certain requirement to provide X amount of space based on the usage. And we cannot just keep taking away access in our central city and then expecting people to come in and go to events or go to conferences or go to conventions. So this needs more work. We need to come up with a coherent strategy. We've got Performing Arts Precinct, which is also being built. And again, you know, all this, doing these things in isolation rather than with a city approach is just terrible. We're getting really bad outcomes, I think, around accessibility. We're becoming an inaccessible city in the central city, and we need to start looking at the big picture.
Right. Thanks for your positive thoughts again. If it's to the contrary, yes. You can talk.
I was going to say, if we're looking at the big picture for the city, what we need to do is look at access for people, not for the private vehicle, and that we need to be prioritising things like buses. But you,
Sorry.
this is not a cross-room
It's a
debate.
debate. Pauline?
Yeah. You look, we've taken out the section with the controversial section today with around the coaches. So on that basis, I will support the resolution. And noting that these car parks around the convention centre are not just for the convention centre. People parking in a disability park there might be going anywhere, over to Turonga, anywhere like that. So I think it's convoluting things about that, and I think staff have done a very good job. I know particularly, Michael, I've worked with you, and you look at the whole city with the parking, and we've got a definite lens on the disability parks, and you can have too many, and then it's a waste of space because they're not used. So it's getting that sweet spot. And I have faith that you've given us a good recommendation here, so I will support it.
Thank you. Look, I'm going to be supporting it too. It's disappointing when councillors use these opportunities to grandstand when we're actually trying to achieve something, and we're not, you know, these car parks are not just for the convention centre, we are trying to obviously create a balance between users, which we've just highlighted through the last item, which we are achieving here. You only have to actually have a look around there to see that we are catering for a lot of users, and it's a shame that councillors just seem to focus on one wee section instead of actually the wider area. But I'll be supporting this, and it's good that we've obviously going to relook at this coach stop to make sure we get that right, and that will be come back to us in due course. So all those in favour? Against?
Councillor Keown?
He says yes.
Councillor McDowell?
Absolutely.
Councillor McDonald? Yes. Councillor Davidson?
Yes.
Councillor Galloway? Councillor Scandrett? No. Councillor Chu? Councillor Coker? Yes. Councillor Cotter?
Aye.
Councillor Chen?
Yes.
Mayor?
Yep.
Councillor Templeton? Aye. Councillor Major?
Yes.
Councillor Turner?
Yes.
Councillor Johansson?
No.
Councillor Daniels?
Aye.
Councillor Goff?
Yes.
The resolution passes 12 to 4.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much. We'll move to item 8. Thank you, Vacant Sites Programme.